And this is what happened. You can't really tell it from the clip from West Side Story that I showed you, but really there was only really one person in the lead of West Side Story who was actually Hispanic, and this is what happened at the Academy Award that year.
The nominees for Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role are Faye Bader in The Children's Hour, Judy Garland in Judgment at Nuremberg, Lottie Lenya in The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone, Una Merkel in... The nominees for Best Performance by an Actress in a Supporting Role are Faye Bader in The Children's Hour, Judy Garland in Judgment at Nuremberg, Lottie Lenya in The Roman Spring of Mrs. Stone, Una Merkel in Summer and Smoke, and Rita Moreno in West Side Story. May I have the envelope, please? Rita Moreno in West Side Story.
I can't believe it! Good Lord! I leave you with that.
As I recall the rules of the Academy, she gets to keep the Oscar, but Rock must be returned to the studio before midnight.
She later said that she had no idea that she was actually going to win that, so she didn't prepare a speech. She just thought it was great to be there, and but she was the only Hispanic who had a starring role in that thing. But in any event, in 1965, the immigration system was changed by the Hart-Celler Act, Senator Hart and then Representative Celler. And it basically abolished the national origins quota that had been set down in the 1921 and 1924 acts. The reason for that was not because there was a sudden surge of enthusiasm for greater immigration. The reason for that was basically because of the Cold War. The Soviets were going around the world, especially to people in Asia and Africa and Latin America, saying, the Americans say that they're so good, but they don't even want you in their country. And so we had to kind of they only want Europeans. They don't want you people, but you can come to the Soviet Union anytime you want. And so what the U.S. did was it abolished the European national origin quota and created a preference system which gave priority to relatives of citizens, professionals, and other individuals with specialized skills, and then special immigrants and things like that. But the thing was relative of U.S. citizens and legal permanent residents. Well, because there were large numbers of legal permanent residents who were from Asia, Africa, or Latin America, especially from Asia, and from Latin America. The act had the effect of increasing immigration from those countries. There's President Johnson signing the act at the Statue of Liberty in October of 1965. Both Senator Hart and Congressman Celler and all of the people who supported the act made it very clear that they did not think that the act was dramatically going to change the ethnic composition of the United States. And that was one of the selling points that they did. This was a Cold War thing, but it's not going to change the way that the United States really is. Well, of course, the opposite happened, because it dramatically increased the number of immigrants, legal immigrants, coming in from Latin America and from Asia. And you can see that from 1990 to 2000, during that decade, the number of European immigrants was only slightly bigger than 10%. There were a lot of illegal immigrants who came along, and in 1986, Congress passed a law giving amnesty to people who had been here before January 1st, 1982, and had resided continuously in the U.S. They had to pay fines and things like that. But since that time, since the Immigration Reform and Control Act of 1986, basically, opponents of immigration have said that any attempt to reform the immigration system is simply another version of this act which gave amnesty. So the act which did give amnesty to millions of people became kind of the stalking horse for people who opposed additional immigration. And of course, in California, the illegal immigration mainly comes from Mexico, and it was it came to a head when Pete Wilson was governor in the early 1990s. And in 1994, Governor Wilson was running for re-election and made illegal immigration, a major part of his campaign. Also, he supported a proposition called Proposition 187, which would have denied public service to illegal immigrants. Wilson's ads heavily focused on that. There's an anti.
They keep coming. 2 million illegal immigrants in California. The federal government won't stop them at the border, yet requires us to pay billions to take care of them. Governor Pete Wilson sent the National Guard to help the Border Patrol. But that's not all.
For Californians who work hard, pay taxes, and obey the laws, I'm suing to force the federal government to control the border. And I'm working to deny state services to illegal immigrants. Enough is enough.
Governor Pete Wilson.
Sorry, once again, I forgot to take off my earplugs. Here they are.
They keep coming. 2 million illegal immigrants in California. The federal government won't stop them at the border, yet requires us to pay billions to take care of them. Governor Pete Wilson sent the National Guard to help the Border Patrol. But that's not all.
For Californians who work hard, pay taxes, and obey the laws, I'm suing to force the federal government to control the border. And I'm working to deny state services to illegal immigrants. Enough is enough.
Governor Pete Wilson. It's how most of us got here. It's how this country was built. American citizenship is a treasure beyond measure. But now the rules are being broken. There's a right way, there's a wrong way. To reward the wrong way is not the American way. Pete Wilson has had the courage to say enough is enough, and to stand up for Californians who work hard, pay taxes, and obey the laws. That's why we need Pete Wilson as governor.
His sister running for governor, his chief of staff for lieutenant governor. Both favor continuing state services for illegal immigrants. Wilson, right now.
Well, as you probably remember, Governor Wilson was reelected, and Proposition 187 passed overwhelmingly. But it's widely regarded as a Pyrrhic victory. Because the result was that large numbers of people who had not voted before really decided to come out and register and vote. And since that time, Hispanics have made up a large and increasingly significant section of the anti-Republican or the Democratic voting base.
Well, political history was made in Los Angeles this week with the swearing in of the first Latino president pro tem of the California State Senate since 1883. Kevin De Leon, who replaces Darrell Steinberg, got his start in politics in 1994, organizing against Proposition 187.
I was raised by a single mother with a third-grade education. She migrated to America, to California, to give my two sisters and me a better life.
The controversial ballot measure aimed to prevent illegal immigrants from accessing public services, including health care and education. Now, California voters passed it overwhelmingly, but it was later struck down in federal court. Yet 20 years later, the legacy of Prop 187 is still being felt, as I found on a visit to San Diego this week. Barrio Logan, a blue-collar San Diego neighborhood sandwiched between the freeway and shipyards, is where Kevin DeLeon grew up. Today, it's represented in the state assembly by Democrat Lorena Gonzalez. She was a grad student when Prop 187 was on the ballot, but as the campaign heated up, Gonzalez says her mother convinced her to pursue public service.
I think if you can identify one thing that single-handedly brought together the Latino community to empower themselves and start ensuring that people who were qualified could get their citizenship, making sure that they were registered to vote, making sure that they actually voted, it was Prop 187.
The daughter of a farm worker from Mexico, Gonzalez says her family, in fact most Latinos she knew, felt personally targeted by the measure, regardless of whether they were here legally or not. Among the most controversial proposals was a ban on letting illegal immigrants use non-emergency health care and other publicly funded services. It would also have prevented undocumented children from attending public schools, while requiring school districts to verify citizenship of all students and their parents.
The way Prop 187 was written, it could have really torn apart families. Children who were in my position here, legally born here, might be afraid to have their parent come to a parent-teacher conference. It didn't make a lot of sense, but instead what happened is it brought us together as a community.
This is the border crossing shown in a 1994 TV ad for Governor Pete Wilson. Its provocative images of people streaming illegally into California from Mexico helped propel Wilson to a landslide re-election.
They keep coming. 2 million illegal immigrants in California.
This fall, we can send a message to Washington to stop illegal immigration by passing Proposition 187, the SOS Initiative.
Pete Nunez, a co-author of Prop 187, served as U.S. Attorney for San Diego under President Ronald Reagan.
We're standing just beyond the port of entry at San Ysidro, California. It's the busiest land port of entry in the world. 20 years ago, most of what you see here today wasn't here then because it was overrun by illegal immigrants. There was no fence, there were no lights, there were no cameras. So it really served as sort of the focal point for everything that was wrong with our immigration policy.
Nunez says the measure tapped into public anger over illegal immigration.
The state of California had recently done a study at the cost to taxpayers, and it was in the billions of dollars. So the idea was we needed to save California from this ongoing invasion from Mexico.
Public outrage over illegal immigration was so strong that some Democrats, including Senator Dianne Feinstein, who was up for re-election that year, started talking tough on border security.
Many nights, 3,000 illegal immigrants try to cross this border. Our Border Patrol agents are outnumbered 60 to 1.
One of the few California Republicans who spoke out against Prop 187 was Ron Unz. He challenged Governor Wilson in the 1994 primary, warning that anti-immigrant measures were bad for California and for the GOP.
The main impact has been that the Republican Party of California, which had been the dominant party on the national level for decades, has been destroyed. There effectively is almost no Republican Party left in California. It's not a viable statewide party. And the reason for that is that the party ended up becoming viewed as incredibly hostile to the new immigrant groups in the state, who are now an important part of the electorate.
Stanford political science professor Gary Segura studies Latino voting trends.
Let's remember that what Prop 187 did was it authorized state workers to withhold government services from anyone they suspected of being an undocumented alien. And so even Latinos of several generations in the United States felt like it really was targeted towards the entire Latino population.
Segura points out that before 1994, Latinos and other immigrant groups often split their votes between Republicans and Democrats. But the fear Prop 187 provoked changed all that.
As a consequence, people mobilized. Latinos started registering to vote. Latinos got very active.
After the 1994 election, the federal courts invalidated most of Prop 187, so it was never enforced. But 20 years later, the issue of illegal immigration still sparks strong feelings in California. This summer, demonstrators protested the large number of unaccompanied minors entering the U.S. illegally from Central America.
We don't want you here!
Angry crowds in Murrieta, just north of San Diego County, blocked a bus with undocumented women and children heading to a government processing facility. It was a reminder that public concern over illegal immigration still lingers, says Republican activist Dolores Chavez Harms.
We have this high influx of kids that are coming from Central America, and Prop 187 was primarily to prevent state funds for covering public welfare for the illegal immigrants into the state.
Things have gotten worse. Illegal immigration is worse. In 1994, we had thought maybe 2 or 3 million. We now have 11 to 12 million people in the country illegally. So we have gone entirely in the wrong direction.
The political direction in California is being driven by changing demographics. This year, Latinos edged past non-Hispanic whites as the single largest race or ethnic group in California. And voter attitudes have changed too. A recent field poll found that 90% of voters supported a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants who learn English and pay back taxes.
All members vote who desire to vote.
And with Latino legislators flexing their muscles in Sacramento, new laws have been passed helping undocumented immigrants. At the San Jose office of the nonprofit Siren, staff attorneys advise clients on how to navigate the new legal landscape. One new law allows undocumented immigrants to get a driver's permit starting in January. And young people who came to the U.S. illegally can obtain work permits without fear of deportation. Assemblywoman Gonzalez marvels at how much California policy toward immigrants has changed since Prop 187 passed.
Nobody anymore will say that a Latino immigrant or a child of an immigrant can't be part of the American dream. That's now what California expects. That is the California dream story.